Welcome to Document Agility, a collaborative online system for enterprise document creation. Document Agility uses business rules to automate the creation of complex documents. The system uses a series of questions, called interviews, to gather information about a new business transaction. The information collected is used by document templates containing business rules to immediately produce accurate documents for the transaction at hand. Document Agility is a role-based system that supports several people working together to collect data about business transactions and produce the documents required to memorialize them. When I first log in, I'm presented with a personalized workspace displaying my items in progress, my patterns, my recent transactions, and system messages. Let's begin by creating the required documents for a new business deal. I'll click New Transaction, and there I'll choose my type of transaction. I'll create a leasing document. I'll then enter a name for the transaction, and I'll use the name also as the description. There are several ways that I can choose to create one: blank, from a pattern, or from an existing set of answers. I can also choose the company for which I'm going to create my document, and I'll get started. Once inside the interview, the questions I'll see and the order in which they're presented are controlled by my role in the transaction. An interview outline and a progress bar make it easy to track my progress through the interview. As I answer questions, sophisticated conditional logic, far beyond typical form skip logic, can be used to determine which questions are presented next based on my answers to previous questions. Input formats and range restrictions ensure that everyone using the interview enters valid and accurate data. And during the interview, I can also import data from other business systems. And my answers are being saved in the background should I ever lose internet connection. And at any time I can click Finish to save my answers in progress and return later. And of course, the interviews render on all types of mobile devices, so I can work from anywhere. Once I've completed the interview, I'll come to the transaction details. There's lots of information here, but let's first look at the available documents for my transaction. Document Agility creates what we call intelligent document packages by determining which documents, forms, or attachments are required for each particular transaction based on the answers supplied during the interview. This list shows the documents that are available for my transaction, and at any time I want, I can create documents in the output format desired by simply clicking and choosing to generate selected. A robust rules-based engine creates the documents based on the business data and business rules. Once that's completed, I can simply click on the format that I'd like to view, and I can quickly see my document. Back inside my transaction details screen, there's much more information available about this transaction, such as its type, its version, its workflow status, and the client for which it's being worked on. If I want, I can also assign a due date for this transaction. The system then also creates a complete history of everything that's been done by every user, including looking at particular changes that were made by any user. There's also a place for notes and a place to upload outside files to become part of the transaction. If I exit the transaction details screen and I come back to my workspace screen, I can see all of the transactions that I currently have in progress. And if I want to find one transaction in particular, I can always use the transaction search. Here I can enter a wide variety of search criteria and find exactly the document that I'm looking for. We've seen how easy it can be for one user to create a set of documents for a transaction. So now let's look at how groups can work together to create documents. Quite often, document-driven processes require teams of people to create documents in a series of workflow steps, where each team adds additional information or plays a certain part in the process. And this is where document agility really shines. Let's say I'm ABC Financial Corporation, and I begin with a broker in the field answering questions about a new leasing deal. So I'll first log in as a broker using a special kind of workspace that we call an initiator account. Here we can answer questions about a new transaction to get information into the system, but I won't be the party that's actually producing the lease documents themselves. My workspace is relatively simple, and it just reflects the fact that I have a limited role in the transaction. So I'll create a new leasing document and give it a name and copy that name into the description. I'll then choose a new data set so I can start with blank questions, and I'll start my interview. When I get to my interview, the questions I'm asked reflect those kinds of questions that a broker would be qualified to answer. When I'm through, I simply click Finish, and I'm brought back to my main transaction screen. There, I can choose to edit my answers if I have more information to add, or I can mark them as done. Here, as I say complete, workflow rules behind the scenes will pass this document on to the transaction group. Workflow rules are very powerful and can be set up to model the document creation process flow for almost any organizational need. One of the actions this particular rule will take is to send an email to the transaction team to let them know about this new incoming transaction. After receiving the email as a member of the transaction team, I'll log into my workspace. There I'll see the DFD Corp transaction reflected as a new transaction. So I'll click on the transaction to begin to work with it. Once I'm there, I can see first of all that the workflow rule changed the workflow status to new request. And although I have many options that I can work on for this particular transaction, my first order of business is to access the interview and add the information into the questions that I need to answer. That way, the document will have all of the information it needs in order to be complete. Instead of answering the interview questions now, if I do try to go ahead and generate a particular document prior to answering all of the questions and providing it the information it needs, the document will appear as missing required information. I can easily see which pieces of information are missing, and when I move into the interview itself, the missing information will appear highlighted in red. I've skipped ahead to the transaction details screen after answering all of the questions, and the first thing that we can see is that the document for the leasing agreement has been generated automatically after I've finished my interview. Let's take a look at some of the workflow options that are available, and let's focus on one in particular called Finalize. The workflow options that I'm presented with might vary based on who I am and what my role is in the transaction. So let's say I've sent some documents to the client for review and I want to finalize my transaction. When I do this, I'll be asked to choose a folder in which to place it. Now, this is not intended to replace document management. It's just intended to be an organized way to track our transactions while we're building them. Now, when I go to access the interview again, instead of being called Access Interview, the button changes to Redraft. If I do go into the interview and change some questions, I'll first be asked to provide a reason why. And let's say I call it a client request. Once I do that and I'm taken to the interview, I can change whatever it is that I wanted to change. And let's say what we want to do is to change the term of the end of the lease out 1 week. If I then finish that and save it, I'll be brought back to my transaction details screen, but notice I'm now in version 2. And I can view the version history and see that it was a client request that explains why version 1 and version 2 exist. Let's head back to our transaction details screen. Since we've created some documents, let's go ahead and share them with either outside parties or other business systems. To do so, I'll click Export. I'll choose the formats and documents that I want to share. And then I have a couple of different ways that I can export documents or share them with other users. I can either send an email to a certain recipient, or I can place the document in an external user's workspace. In this particular instance, I'll share it with a client. I've got Mary Client set up already as an account and a user account for this particular transaction, and I'll share them with her. If I click Export, that will place the documents in her workspace, and I can see down here in my collaboration area with external users that Mary Client now has access to these two different documents. So let's head over and take a look at what Mary might see when she logs in. Whenever a document is shared, the recipient will receive an email letting her know where to log in and what user credentials to use. When Mary logs into her workspace, she'll see the two documents I've shared with her, and she can easily view them. Back in my transaction details screen, I can even choose to share an interview with a client. I might select that Mary Client would answer interview questions so that she can supply information to this transaction. I can even set an expiration date if I want to give her only so much time, for example a week, in order to answer her questions. I click Invite, and Mary will receive an email that tells her we've invited her to answer questions and gives her the credentials and where she can log in. When Mary logs back into her workspace, she'll see a very simple user interface directing her on how to start her interview, to access her questions. She can then fill in all the information that she needs to, and when she clicks Finish, she'll return back to the screen and this time be presented with options for editing her answers or marking them as done. Once she's finished, she can simply mark them as done, and this will complete her part. And if we head back to our workspace, we can see by the green collaboration icon next to the DFD Corp transaction that Mary has completed her answers. Most documents are negotiated and require manual changes, and Document Agility can make this process a lot more organized. Let's say I'm going to send this particular document to outside counsel, and they're going to make changes. If I save my document to my desktop, I can then upload the document through the Ancillary Files module. I'll simply give it a name, choose the file that I saved, and when I do, the system will detect that this document was derived from a document created on the system. That will make the document display in the Ancillary Files area, but it will also mean that the document will become the latest version, a manually edited version, of the lease agreement. I can even choose to view a red line comparison document that compares the document I manually edited with the latest document on the system, and I can easily spot my changes in a Word Track Changes environment. Document Agility's approach to creating documents by first collecting data means there's a great deal of data that will be available to me. By clicking the Publish button for any transaction, I can immediately publish this data to a built-in database. And, using our built-in reporting module, or your own business intelligence tool, you can quickly see information about the process of creating documents, such as workflow statuses, or which groups have certain transactions, or you can actually view information inside of all the interviews across all of the different transactions you've created, including interesting visualizations like areas of the country where you're creating transactions. Behind the scenes in the Document Agility system is a robust content management area that lets me precisely control every user's access to the various kinds of content on the system. And there's a module for creating workflow rules to precisely control the document creation process. The templates and interviews used in Document Agility are created inside of a powerful but easy-to-use program called HotDocs that works as a plug-in inside of the Microsoft Word environment. Creating templates and interviews doesn't require programming knowledge, just the ability to think conceptually about document construction. Document Agility is deployed as a secure, hosted online application. We employ stringent security and ensure a safe and reliable user experience. For larger implementations, an on-premises deployment is available as well. Thanks for taking the time to learn more about Document Agility. For more information, download our white paper.